We have a warning for parents about cereal and children.
Popular breakfast foods are contaminated with a controversial weed killer.
What if I told you that the food you trust most might be just as dangerous as the products we once banned?
What's the matter, Sonny? I can't keep up. You need new Kellogg's Apple Jack.
Post Super Sugar Crisp cereal, part of a balanced breakfast.
What if the smiling cartoon on your cereal box used the same tactics as the cigarette ads that told us doctors recommend Camels? You laugh now, right? Those old ads feel absurd, almost comical. A man in a lab coat, holding a pack of smokes, assuring you it's good for your throat. A mother handing her child a cigarette because it helps with digestion. But here's the thing. At the time, no one questioned it. It was science. It was normal. And today, we look at boxes of cereal labeled immune support, granola bars called natural, yogurt branded with smiling hearts, and bold claims like heart healthy or gut friendly. We don't question it because it feels normal. But normal doesn't mean true. Behind the comforting colors, the fake health halos, the cheerful jingles in supermarket aisles, lies a story we've heard before. It's a playbook, one that was written by Big Tobacco and perfected by Big Food. See, the cigarette industry didn't just sell nicotine. They sold trust. They sold health. They sold addiction dressed up as choice. Sound familiar? Because food companies learned something crucial. You don't need to make a product good. You just need to make people believe it's good. Take sugar, wrap it in a label that says low fat. Add a dash of artificial vitamins. Call it breakfast. Now put it in front of a child. Congratulations, you've just created a lifelong customer. All without telling a single lie, at least not one you can prove in court. This is the deception hiding in plain sight. This is the illusion of health. And here's the twist. It's not just that these foods are unhealthy, it's that they were designed to be. Just like tobacco was engineered for addiction, our food has been engineered for compulsion. We were told to trust the experts. We were told to read the labels. We were told to eat whole grains, fortified cereals, and low-fat everything. But the louder the marketing got, the sicker we became. And today we face a strange reality, where ultra-processed food, filled with artificial flavors and synthetic additives, is sold to us as health. And real food, grown, unprocessed, simple, is seen as boring, or expensive, or inconvenient. So ask yourself, if we've been here before, with an industry that denied, delayed, and deceived, why are we falling for it again? The labels have changed, the packaging is shinier, but the lie, it's the same. And it's not just fooling us, it's poisoning us. Slowly, silently, every single day. They don't wear lab coats, they don't sit behind microscopes, they wear suits, sit in boardrooms, and their job isn't to feed you, it's to sell you. This isn't just about snacks and cereal, it's about one of the most powerful industries in the world. An empire measured not just in dollars, but in daily habits, in kitchen cabinets, in childhood memories. Big Food. It sounds harmless, like it's just a bunch of grocery brands and frozen pizzas. But behind the labels, behind the smiling logos and catchy slogans, lies a machine with one purpose: not to nourish, but to dominate. This is a trillion-dollar industry, bigger than Big Tobacco ever was. And it doesn't just influence what you eat, it shapes how you think about food entirely. Because they're not just in the food business, they're in the belief business. Their product is trust, and their strategy is repetition. Get you to eat it once? That's good. Get you to eat it every day without thinking? That's profit. Every flavor engineered, every portion calculated, every bite designed to hit the bliss point. That sweet spot where your brain lights up and your body asks for more, and then more again. Because this isn't just food, it's engineered craving. That's the hidden game. It's not about hunger. It's not about health. It's about control. Think about it. Tobacco didn't make cigarettes to be enjoyed occasionally. They made them to be needed, to be part of your daily rhythm, to feel wrong without them. Food conglomerates, they studied that model, and they made it edible. That sugary cereal your kids eat every morning, it's not just breakfast, it's programming, reinforcement, a soft addiction, wrapped in cartoon colors and vitamin claims. They've created a system where food isn't about fuel anymore, it's about feeling, comfort, reward, escape. Because if they can turn food into a solution for every emotion, stress, boredom, sadness, celebration, then they never have to compete on quality, only on how you feel when you eat it. They don't want to sell you a product, they want to sell you a habit. Just like big tobacco turned nicotine into a daily ritual, big food turned consumption into culture, into identity, into comfort. And when you start needing it, not just wanting it, they win. The scariest part, you'll never even know it happened because you'll just think you're hungry. But that feeling, it's not hunger. It's the strategy working exactly as planned. We are a nation addicted to answers. Eat this, not that. Carbs are bad. No, fat is bad. Wait, maybe it's sugar? Actually, it's calories, or maybe seed oils, or dairy, or gluten, or meat. Every week, a new villain. Every month, a new miracle. And in the middle of all this noise, we're just trying to figure out what to put on our plates. But here's the uncomfortable truth. This confusion? It's not a glitch. It's the business model, because the more lost we are, the more we depend on labels, on claims, on whatever product shouts the loudest from the shelf. Confusion isn't a side effect of the modern food system. It's a feature, a carefully engineered fog that keeps the public spinning in circles, chasing wellness, but never quite arriving. And while we chase, they profit. Think about it. If everyone agreed on what healthy food looked like, how long would ultra-processed snacks survive? How long would sugary breakfast cereals sit on shelves? Clarity kills profits, but confusion sells. So the industry funds research, not to find truth, but to create doubt. One study says red meat is bad. Another says it boosts testosterone. One says eggs are dangerous. Another says they're a superfood. And who's paying for these studies? Often, it's the very companies whose products are under scrutiny. They don't need to prove their food is healthy. They just need to muddy the waters enough that you stop asking. And it works, because once you're confused, you default to convenience, to taste, to what's familiar, which just so happens to be exactly what they're selling. But this isn't just happening in glossy marketing campaigns. It's happening in policy rooms, in the hands of lobbyists who shape the rules meant to protect you. Government guidelines, the ones that tell us what to eat, are influenced by the very companies selling the food. It's like asking the cigarette industry to write public health policy in the 60s. The food pyramid, the balanced diet, the daily values listed on your cereal box, they weren't created in a vacuum. They were shaped by negotiations, favors, and billion-dollar influence. So while you're told to count calories, no one tells you who's counting the money behind the curtain. The goal has never been to inform. It's to maintain control, to make sure the public is never quite certain. So the market never has to change. Because if you knew the truth, you might stop buying. But if you're just unsure enough, you'll keep looking for answers. Right there in the aisle on a box designed by the very people keeping you in the dark. Most of us think we know what food is, we grow it, we cook it, we eat it. But in today's world, that definition is no longer enough, because much of what we eat isn't really food anymore. It's been chemically restructured, mechanically modified, and nutritionally hollowed out. Designed more for profit than for nourishment, and yet it's everywhere. To understand what we're really eating, we need to understand the term that's finally starting to cut through the noise: ultra-processed food. Not all food processing is bad. Washing, freezing, canning. These are basic methods that help preserve real food. They help make it safer, more convenient. That's not the problem. The real problem begins when the process becomes the product. According to Dr. Marion Nestle, molecular biologist and one of the most respected voices in food policy, ultra-processed foods are industrially produced formulations made mostly or entirely from substances extracted from foods or derived from food constituents with little or no intact whole food. In simpler terms, it's not what your grandmother would recognize as food. Let's break it down. An ear of corn, unprocessed. Frozen corn, processed. Doritos? That's ultra-processed. A baked potato, real food. Dehydrated instant mashed potatoes, ultra-processed. Yogurt made with milk and cultures, minimally processed. Fruit on the bottom, artificially sweetened, shelf-stable yogurt with stabilizers, gums, and flavor enhancers, ultra-processed. These aren't small differences. They're the difference between food that fuels and food that manipulates. Researchers at the NOVA classification system, developed by Brazilian scientists and now used globally, have defined ultra-processed foods as those containing ingredients never or rarely used in kitchens, such as hydrogenated oils, modified starches, flavor enhancers, emulsifiers, colorants, and artificial sweeteners. In other words, you could follow a recipe for a loaf of bread, but you'd never have the ingredients, the equipment, or the chemical knowledge to recreate a Twinkie. And that's the point. Ultra-processed foods aren't meant to be made at home. They're designed for factories. And their job isn't to nourish your body, it's to hit sensory triggers, bliss points of salt, sugar, and fat, so effectively that you reach for more. Not because you're hungry, but because your brain is lit up like a pinball machine. And they're everywhere. According to a 2022 study published in the BMJ, over 58% of the average American diet comes from ultra-processed foods. In children and adolescents, that number is even higher, reaching nearly 67%. And the consequences? They're mounting. Study after study now links high intake of ultra-processed foods with heart disease, type 2 diabetes, cancer, depression, even early death. Yet the packages still scream whole grain, low fat, fortified with vitamins, because if they can control the language, they can keep controlling the public. But now you know, not all food is created equal, and some of it was never food to begin with. You were never supposed to stop at just one bite. That's not a flaw in your willpower, it's the result of design. Because modern food, especially ultra-processed food, isn't just made to taste good, it's engineered to be irresistible, to hijack your brain, and override the natural signals that tell you you've had enough. Researchers call these foods hyperpalatable. That term might sound dramatic, but it's real, used in peer-reviewed studies to describe combinations of ingredients that rarely occur in nature, but are crafted to maximize pleasure. A 2019 study published in Obesity identified over 7,700 hyperpalatable foods in the US food system. They're everywhere. Fast food, frozen meals, even so-called health snacks. What makes them hyperpalatable? It's the trio: fat, sugar, and salt. Combined in just the right ratios, they create a sensory hit, a dopamine rush, a flavor experience your brain tags as important, something to seek out again. And when that flavor is tied to a sense of reward, to memory, to comfort, it becomes more than just food. It becomes a craving. This is not a guess. This is strategy. And here's where it gets even darker. It's not just that salt, sugar, and fat taste good. They also serve a second purpose. They cover up the flaws. Journalist Michael Moss, author of Salt, Sugar, Fat, tells a story that pulls back the curtain. He visited Kellogg's headquarters to talk about salt content in their cereals. He asked why they hadn't reduced the salt, given public concern over sodium and heart disease. They invited him in for a taste test. They poured him a bowl of salt-free cornflakes, added some milk, and waited. Before he could even comment, the company's own spokesperson took a bite and froze. Her eyes widened. She swallowed hard, and then she said, "Metal. I taste metal. Not flavor, not blandness, metal." And she wasn't alone. The company's chief technical officer, sitting nearby, laughed, then admitted, "That's why we use salt. It masks the off notes from the industrial processing." Off notes. That's what they call the unnatural chemical flavors created by factory-scale food production. Salt covers them up, sugar smooths the texture, fat enhances the mouthfeel. These ingredients aren't just added for taste. They're used to disguise the very fact that what you're eating barely resembles real food. This is addiction by design, a calculated formula that pushes past your body's built-in safety systems. You're full, but you keep eating. You feel guilty, but you crave more. You promise to stop, but tomorrow you're back at it again. And the industry counts on that, because they're not just selling snacks, they're selling behavioral loops, habits, dependencies, built one bite at a time, masked in flavor, and engineered in silence. It looks official, a badge, a seal, a stamp of approval. But what if that symbol of health on your food packaging isn't science? It's theater. In 2015, Kraft Singles, yes, the plastic-wrapped cheese product that isn't legally allowed to be called cheese, received a bold green label on its packaging. It read, "Kids eat right." To most parents, it looked like an endorsement, an assurance. a declaration that this product was not just safe, but good for your child. There was just one problem. The Kids Eat Right label wasn't awarded based on nutritional merit. It wasn't reviewed by independent scientists. It wasn't the result of a breakthrough in food technology. It was a deal, a partnership between Kraft and the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. The largest organization of food and nutrition professionals in the US, Kraft, paid. They got the seal, and parents got the illusion of health. This wasn't a one-off. It was a glimpse into a broader strategy used by food conglomerates for decades. Align with trusted institutions and use their credibility as camouflage. Because when the science doesn't support your product, you borrow trust from somewhere else. Food companies know that most consumers don't read scientific journals. They read labels. They respond to symbols. And when those symbols look like health, feel like science, sound like expertise, they work. But behind the curtain, it's marketing, not medicine. Take the American Heart Association. They offer a heart check certification. But according to the Center for Science and the Public Interest, food companies can pay thousands of dollars per product to use the label. Many items that carry it are high in sugar, sodium, or ultra-processed ingredients. And yet, they pass. Because the bar isn't optimal nutrition. It's minimal compliance. And a checkbook. These partnerships are dressed in wellness, but built on business. The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, yes, the same one from the Kraft Singles deal, has received funding from Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Nestle, and even the Sugar Association. And what do they get in return? Access, influence, a seat at the table when dietary recommendations are being written. This is the theater of nutrition. Stage props include fortified labels, endorsements, food pyramids, and smiling children. Behind the scenes, lobbying, financial incentives, and strategic silence. It's not about what's healthy, it's about what sells. Because when health becomes a marketing tool, truth becomes optional. And as long as consumers believe what's on the front of the package, they'll never read the fine print on the back. That's the game. And it's not just misleading, it's dangerous. Because when trust is sold, health is sacrificed. And the ones who pay for it are the people trying to do the right thing. The blueprint was written decades ago. When smoking was first linked to lung cancer, the tobacco industry didn't panic. They planned. Step 1. Cast doubt on the science. They didn't need to disprove the studies. Just delay the truth. Claim the research was inconclusive. Say the data wasn't strong enough. Ask for more trials, more time, more objectivity. Step 2. Discredit the messengers. Make the scientists look biased, undermine their motives, accuse them of fear-mongering. And step 3. Flood the field with noise. Pay for studies. Publish their own findings. Create the illusion of disagreement, even where there was none. Confusion was the goal. Doubt was the product. And it worked. Big Tobacco delayed accountability for over 50 years. Not by proving cigarettes were safe, but by making the public unsure. And Big Food was watching. Because when their products started raising red flags, when obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and cancer became impossible to ignore, they reached for the same playbook. Take Coca-Cola. In 2015, it was revealed that Coca-Cola had quietly funneled millions into research, promoting the idea that exercise, not diet, was the key to solving obesity. They funded the Global Energy Balance Network, a non-profit that downplayed sugar's role in weight gain. Its message? You don't need to cut calories. You just need to move more. It was clever. It was subtle. And it was backed by science. Their science. But Coca-Cola didn't stop at funding. They placed their own researchers, influenced academic conferences, and supported institutions that shaped public health messaging. This wasn't about advancing knowledge. It was about control. Because if you can pay for a headline that says, "Soda isn't the problem," you've already won. And it wasn't just Coca-Cola. The sugar industry, too, has a long history of strategic misdirection. A now infamous paper published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1967 downplayed the role of sugar in heart disease and shifted the blame to saturated fat. That paper was secretly funded by the Sugar Research Foundation, and for decades, it helped shape national dietary guidelines. Step by step, tactic by tactic, Big Food followed Big Tobacco's lead. And when independent researchers started speaking up, they were attacked, criticized, discredited. Their credentials questioned, their motives challenged, their funding scrutinized, often by people whose own funding came from food corporations. It's a war on truth disguised as debate, a game of chess where every move is calculated to protect the bottom line, because it's not about proving their food is healthy. It's about creating just enough uncertainty that you keep eating it anyway. That's the genius of the tobacco strategy. You don't need to win the argument. You just need to make the argument endless. And while scientists fight to be heard, marketers keep winning the public's trust. One ad at a time, one label at a time, one bite at a time. The science should be straightforward, right? Objective, unbiased. After all, it's the foundation on which we build our understanding of health. But what happens when the people funding that science have something to gain from the results? It's an uncomfortable truth, but it's one we can no longer ignore. Industry-funded studies, especially those paid for by food companies, don't just influence public opinion. They shape the very policies that affect what we eat. Let's look at the numbers. A 2013 review published in PLOS Medicine analyzed over 200 studies funded by the food and beverage industry. It found that more than 60% of these studies showed favorable results for their sponsors, results that were aligned with the industry's interests. And only 3% of the studies reached conclusions that could be seen as unfavorable to the sponsors. Think about that. Out of over 200 studies, less than 5 showed anything critical of the companies funding them. This isn't by accident. It's by design. The money behind the science doesn't just influence what gets published. It determines the questions that get asked, the methodology that gets used, the conclusions that get drawn. And this isn't confined to obscure journals or fringe studies. It's happening at the highest levels of academia, where decisions about public health and policy are made. Take the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee, for example. This is the group responsible for creating the guidelines that determine what the American public is told to eat. They shape everything from school lunch programs to nutrition education, and yet, many members of the committee have direct ties to the food industry. A 2017 analysis by the New York Times found that 9 out of 20 committee members had financial conflicts of interest, ties to food companies, pharmaceutical firms, or weight loss product manufacturers. This isn't a minor issue. It's a fundamental flaw in the process that affects millions of people. If you think about it, these aren't just minor ethical lapses. These are fundamental conflicts that can and do shape the very recommendations we follow. It's not about the science, it's about who's paying for it. In one glaring example, researchers found that food industry-funded studies were more likely to promote products like sugary snacks, low-fat processed foods, and artificial sweeteners, products that were part of the sponsors' portfolios, than independent studies that could lead to conclusions unfavorable to those same companies. And the ripple effect of this is vast. When the science is skewed, when nutrition guidelines are influenced by corporate interests, we're left with a public that is confused, caught between conflicting studies, caught between well-funded advertisements, and the patchwork of scientific truth. The truth is, food companies don't just sell products, they sell policies, they sell research, and ultimately, they sell influence over how we think about food. The result? We get confused, misinformed, and ultimately sick. It's not that the science doesn't exist. It's that the truth is buried under layers of influence, money, and vested interests. And until we can separate science from profit, the real story of food will remain hidden, and the people who need the truth most, the ones looking for answers, will keep getting sold lies. Science is supposed to guide us, to illuminate the facts, to cut through noise, and deliver clarity. But what happens when that clarity becomes a threat to billion-dollar industries? You don't deny the science outright. You dilute it, you delay it, you turn consensus into controversy. That's exactly what the food industry has done. As more independent studies began linking ultra-processed foods to serious health risks, obesity, diabetes, cancer, the industry didn't offer transparency. They launched a campaign of strategic doubt, not against the findings themselves, but against the language. The term ultra-processed should be simple. It refers to foods made with industrial ingredients, synthetic additives, and minimal whole food content. Products like frozen meals, flavored yogurts, sugary cereals, and energy bars. But the food lobby claims the definition is too broad, that it's not scientifically rigorous, that it might confuse consumers, or worse, unfairly stigmatize their products. So they pushed back. In 2022, the International Food Information Council, a trade group funded by major food and beverage companies, argued that the term ultra-processed should be avoided altogether in public policy. Their reasoning? It lacks a universally agreed-upon definition. That sounds reasonable on the surface. Who doesn't want scientific precision? But this is a familiar move, one designed not to seek truth, but to stall action. A 2021 report from the Journal of Public Health Nutrition revealed that industry-funded groups frequently call for more research whenever proposed policies could threaten profits, whether it's on sugar taxes, front-of-package labeling, or, yes, definitions of ultra-processed foods. It's the same strategy used by Big Tobacco in the 60s, and it's working. Even now, major dietary policy bodies like the U.S. Dietary Guidelines Committee are being lobbied to avoid the term ultra-processed in their reports. Industry groups argue that it could lead to confusion, but the real concern isn't confusion, it's clarity, because once people understand what ultra-processed means, once they recognize the extent of it in their daily lives, it becomes much harder to sell cereal as health food, much harder to put a halo on frozen pizza, much harder to market sugar-filled yogurts as gut-friendly. So they fight to blur the line. They argue that some processed foods might still offer nutrients, that we shouldn't demonize entire categories, that food choice is personal, that the science is evolving. But behind those arguments is a clear intention: protect the status quo. The illusion of scientific debate is powerful. It keeps consumers doubting, it keeps policymakers hesitating, and it buys time. Time to sell, time to advertise, time to repackage the same products under new names with new labels and the same consequences. Until clarity becomes policy, the food industry will continue to weaponize complexity. Because if they can keep us arguing over definitions, they can keep us from asking better questions, like who benefits from the confusion and who pays the price. It sounds unbelievable, but the same companies that once sold cigarettes are the same ones that helped build the modern food industry. Let that sink in. The same corporate empires that knowingly pushed a product linked to cancer and addiction for decades quietly shifted into your kitchen. In the 1980s and 90s, tobacco giants weren't just selling Marlboros, they were buying your food. Philip Morris, the company behind Marlboro and Virginia Slims, became one of the most powerful forces in American groceries. They acquired Kraft in 1988, then General Foods, and eventually Nabisco. For a brief but critical period, one of the most notorious tobacco companies in the world controlled some of the most trusted food brands in your pantry. R.J. Reynolds, another cigarette giant, owned Nabisco before selling it to Philip Morris. Think about that. Oreos, Chips Ahoy, Ritz crackers, all once managed under the same corporate umbrella as Camel cigarettes. And they didn't just bring their money, they brought their methods. Because Big Tobacco didn't just sell addictive products, they perfected the science of addiction. They studied behavior, refined marketing, tested how far they could push human biology without crossing the line of legality. And then, they applied that knowledge to food. In his Pulitzer Prize-winning reporting, journalist Michael Moss revealed how tobacco execs trained food executives to use the same emotional manipulation and sensory engineering to sell snacks and frozen meals. They weren't interested in feeding people, they were interested in keeping them hooked. Food wasn't just a product, it became a tool. A way to tap into the same reward systems that cigarettes once triggered: highly processed, perfectly portioned, chemically enhanced. From the crunch of a potato chip to the melt-in-your-mouth texture of a cookie, every detail was designed to make you reach for more. And like cigarettes, the goal was simple: repeat consumption. They applied the same psychology, the same shelf placement strategies, the same investment in brand loyalty from childhood. You've seen this before. Cartoon mascots, sports sponsorships, health claims. Sound familiar? Because when the tobacco industry was finally forced to admit its role in a public health crisis, it pivoted, not by reforming, but by rebranding. Instead of nicotine, it was sugar. Instead of tar, it was trans fats. Instead of smoke, it was marketing smoke screens. They learned that it didn't matter what they were selling, as long as it was legal, cheap to produce, and built for dependence. And while cigarettes are now behind counters with warning labels, their nutritional cousins sit in bright packaging, right at eye level in every store. This isn't history, it's the present. And the playbook? It never really changed, only the packaging did. They didn't stumble into this. It wasn't an accident. They knew exactly what they were doing, what they were building. And they did it anyway. Michael Moss, the investigative journalist who spent years researching the processed food industry, recalls one moment that changed everything for him. He was sitting across from a former executive at Philip Morris, a man who had once been their top legal counsel, a man who knew the inner workings of the tobacco machine, and then helped guide the food empire it quietly became. They talked about addiction, about cigarettes, and then suddenly the conversation shifted. The former exec leaned in and said, "You know, I was always one of those people who could smoke one cigarette a day. Put the pack away, no problem." He paused. "But I can't go near a bag of our Oreo cookies. If I do, I'll eat half the bag in one sitting." He wasn't joking, and he wasn't alone. Because inside these companies, at the highest levels, there's no illusion, no confusion. They know their products are addictive. They know they're manipulating biology, and they know the people eating them often can't stop. That moment, that confession, it wasn't just about cookies. It was about control. These foods are created to override our internal brakes, to short-circuit the signals that tell us we're full, that we've had enough. They're optimized not for nutrition, but for what the industry calls the bliss point, a perfect balance of sugar, salt, and fat that makes your brain light up and your self-control dim. Executives don't just understand this, they plan for it. And while they flood the market with brightly colored snacks, sugary cereals, and frozen meals made in labs, what do they eat? Often, they don't. Former insiders have revealed that many high-ranking officials at these companies don't actually consume the products they help sell. Not because of dietary preferences, because they know what's inside. They know how it's made. They know it's not real food. It's not a conspiracy, it's strategy. A food scientist who worked with one of the largest snack producers in the world once admitted in the New York Times that he was instructed to reduce cost and maximize flavor, not health. When he raised concerns, he was told, "That's not our department. Profit is the department. Consumption is the metric. Addiction is the engine." And while we're taught to blame ourselves for not having enough willpower, they're counting on it. Because if the product makes you lose control, you'll buy more. And if you blame yourself, you won't question them. They knew all along. They still know, and they're still doing it. Because in this industry, the more you eat, the more they win. The exit of big tobacco from the food business didn't slow anything down. It sped things up. Because once the groundwork was laid, once the formulas were perfected, the addiction mechanisms mapped, the marketing blueprints written, new players saw the opportunity, and they ran with it. After Philip Morris divested from Kraft and other food brands in the early 2000s, something unexpected happened. Instead of backing away from the hyper-engineered food model, the rest of the industry leaned in. They had seen the results. They had seen how powerful those formulations could be. And now, with fewer public ties to tobacco, the scrutiny faded. But the strategy stayed. What followed was a quiet reformulation race. A wave of changes that didn't make food healthier, just more addictive. Companies began tweaking their products, not to improve ingredients, but to enhance cravings, more salt, more emulsifiers, more synthetic flavors and stabilizers to create that perfect bite every time. The goal wasn't to make better food, it was to make food that was harder to resist. According to a 2022 report published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, roughly 69% of the US food supply now qualifies as ultra-processed. That includes snacks, drinks, frozen meals, fast food, and yes, even health products like granola bars and protein shakes. Let that number sit for a moment. Nearly 7 out of every 10 items in the grocery store are no longer just food. They're food products, engineered compositions of industrial ingredients designed to be shelf-stable, hyperpalatable, and profitable. And it's not just the big names anymore. Non-tobacco-owned companies saw what Kraft and Nabisco had done under the Philip Morris empire. They studied the data, they studied the formulas, and they began to replicate the same methods. Because in a competitive market, where shelf space is everything and consumer loyalty is fragile, the safest bet is creating something people can't stop eating. Hyperpalatable foods became the gold standard, and not just for taste, for profit margins, for repeat purchases, for market dominance. Every chip optimized for crunch, every cookie layered with just enough sugar to spark dopamine, every frozen dinner loaded with flavors you'll never find in a home kitchen. This isn't accidental. It's a new kind of food system, one that doesn't feed hunger but manufactures it. The consequences: rising obesity rates, skyrocketing rates of diabetes, especially in children, an entire generation that's grown up on foods designed to bypass fullness and prolong cravings. And the worst part? These companies still market it as choice, as convenience, as health. But when nearly 3/4 of the food supply is designed to make you overeat, is it really a choice at all? The rise of hyperpalatable foods wasn't a response to what people needed. It was a response to what companies wanted. And what they wanted was a system where more eating means more winning, and less resistance means less accountability. We're told it's our fault, that we just need more discipline, more control, more willpower. We believe it because it's everywhere. The narrative that says, if you're overweight, if you can't stop eating chips, if you reach for sugar when you're stressed, it's on you. You're weak. You lack self-control. You just need to try harder. But what if that's not the truth? What if the system is built to make you fail and then blame you when you do? Because that's exactly what's happening. For decades, the food industry has relied on one powerful idea, that eating is a personal choice, and addiction to food, that's just an excuse. But addiction science says otherwise. A 2018 study published in Appetite found that ultra-processed foods share characteristics with addictive substances: quick absorption, intense reward, and withdrawal symptoms when removed. These foods aren't just tasty, they're neurochemically engineered to create compulsion. Dr. Ashley Gearhart, a clinical psychologist at the University of Michigan and leading researcher in food addiction, has shown that hyperpalatable foods activate the brain's reward system in ways strikingly similar to drugs like cocaine and nicotine. Not metaphorically, literally. MRI scans reveal how the brain lights up, how dopamine surges when we eat a food high in sugar, fat, and salt. And the more we eat these foods, the more we crave them. Not for fuel, but for the high. So let's be clear. This isn't about weakness, it's about biology. And the people designing these foods, they know this. They hire neuroscientists, they run experiments, they measure how quickly a snack disappears in your mouth, how long it lingers, what texture makes you reach back into the bag. They manipulate flavor layering, temperature sensitivity, and crunch acoustics to bypass your natural satiety cues. Your brain says, enough. But the food says, just one more. And when you fail to resist, you don't question the food. You question yourself. That's the brilliance of the system. By placing the blame on the individual, corporations escape scrutiny. No one asks why a product was designed to override self-regulation. No one challenges the billions spent on engineering overconsumption. We just try a new diet and fail again. It's a loop, a profitable one. Because shame doesn't stop consumption, it fuels it. And while you're busy blaming yourself, they're busy counting profits. The myth of willpower is one of the most effective tools in corporate nutrition. It reframes addiction as choice, manipulation as freedom, but it's not your lack of control. It's their abundance of it. They control the food. They control the message. And for far too long, they've controlled the blame. The truth? You were never supposed to win this fight, because they built it knowing exactly how to make you lose. Every 5 years, the US government updates its dietary guidelines. It's supposed to be a reset, an honest look at the latest nutrition science, a moment where public health takes precedence over profit. But behind closed doors, there's a different conversation happening, because before a single recommendation reaches the public, it passes through a battlefield of influence. Trade groups, lobbyists, industry-funded experts, they all have a seat at the table, and they all have something to lose. At the center of it is a coalition called the Food and Beverage Issue Alliance. It sounds bland, bureaucratic, harmless, but it's anything but. This alliance is a megaphone for some of the most powerful names in the processed food world: Kellogg's, Nestlé, PepsiCo, the Sugar Association, the American Beverage Association. Their mission? To ensure that new dietary guidelines don't threaten their business models. In 2021, as talk grew louder about limiting ultra-processed food, the alliance issued a public statement. They urged the government not to use the term ultra-processed in any official recommendation. Not because it's inaccurate, but because, according to them, it's confusing. Confusing to who? Because researchers around the world are increasingly clear. Studies published in the BMJ, The Lancet, and JAMA have all found direct links between ultra-processed food and chronic diseases like heart failure, cancer, obesity, and cognitive decline. But clarity is dangerous when it threatens the shelf life of your product. So they respond the way industries always do when their power is challenged. They call for more research. They say it's too early to act. They argue that the science is evolving, that regulation would be premature. Sound familiar? It's the same strategy Big Tobacco used. Back in 1950, the first study linking cigarettes to lung cancer was published. The tobacco industry immediately pushed back. They demanded more evidence. They funded their own studies. They created the illusion of scientific debate and bought themselves nearly 50 years. It wasn't until 1998 that the US government forced tobacco companies into a historic settlement, and the truth finally became policy. Do we really want to wait that long again? Because we're already seeing the consequences. The average American diet is now over 60% ultra-processed. Childhood obesity rates are climbing, and still, the official guidelines, designed to protect public health, are shaped by those selling the very food causing harm. This isn't a policy problem, it's a power problem, and unless that power is confronted, the guidelines will remain what they've always been, a negotiation between public health and corporate interest. What happens next depends on who wins that negotiation. The science is there, the stakes are clear, but the outcome, still uncertain. Because when billions are on the line, truth moves slowly, and the clock is ticking. The greatest danger isn't what's in the food, it's what we're told about it. Because misinformation isn't just misleading, it's fatal. It shapes how we shop, how we eat, how we raise our children, and how we define what's normal. It makes ultra-processed food look safe, makes marketing feel like science, turns labels into shields, even when what they hide is harming us. And the worst part? It's not coming from some fringe source. It's embedded in our institutions, woven into dietary guidelines, whispered through trusted partnerships and polished endorsements. This is not about conspiracy, it's about strategy. When people don't know what to believe, they stop asking questions, they stop resisting, and they settle into the patterns that keep profits flowing. But we deserve more than that. We deserve food policies that reflect evidence, not industry sponsorships. We deserve dietary advice shaped by truth, not designed to protect bottom lines. The science exists. Clear, peer-reviewed international studies, the BMJ, the Lancet, JAMA, each pointing to the same conclusion: ultra-processed foods are linked to serious health consequences, and their dominance in our food system is not sustainable. Yet the messaging we receive continues to dance around that truth. Why? Because clarity threatens power, and misinformation protects it. And if that sounds familiar, it should. It took nearly 50 years for tobacco companies to face real consequences. From the first study linking smoking to lung cancer in 1950, to the landmark Master Settlement Agreement in 1998, an entire generation was sacrificed to corporate delay. We cannot afford to repeat that timeline. We don't have 50 years. We don't even have 5. Because every day we wait, ultra-processed food becomes more entrenched, more normalized, more defended by the very systems that should be protecting us. The next chance to revise the US dietary guidelines won't come until 2030. That's 5 years from now. 5 more years of rising childhood obesity, 5 more years of diabetes rates climbing, 5 more years of silence, sold as science. So what can we do? We can demand transparency. We can support independent research. We can question who funds the headlines we read. And we can start voting with more than just our ballots. We can vote with our carts, our clicks, our conversations. Because the real enemy isn't just sugar, or fat, or salt. It's the lie that we're eating by choice when we've been fed manipulation. And the truth? It's not radical. It's not complicated. It's simple. Everyone deserves access to food that nourishes, to labels that inform, to a system that values health over profit. But the window is closing. And if we don't act now, the next chance won't come until it's too late.